Tranquility Base, this is Houston. Could we get both of you on the camera for a minute, please?
The end of World War II seemed like the beginning of a peaceful era. With Germany's surrender on May 7, 1945, however, the alliance of convenience that had bound the United States and the Soviet Union ended. What followed over the course of the next 4 decades was a new kind of conflict, a battle of ideologies manifesting itself in many forms, from sporting events to proxy wars. By 1961, the development of rocket technology created a new opportunity for competition between the United States and the Soviets, the race to the moon. The Apollo 11 mission originated as an aspect of the United States and Soviet Union's conflict in the Cold War. Apollo 11 had acted as a turning point in the Cold War, solidifying American victory, but also reaping results beyond its original purpose, revolutionizing space research while inspiring great technological advancement and societal changes in the United States. The Apollo 11 mission was a byproduct of the Cold War. As early as the 1950s, the United States and Soviet Union were using ballistic missiles, which could be utilized for space launch. The United States' interest in launching a surveillance satellite led to the development of a scientific satellite as a precursor for the big project. On March 14, 1955, the United States National Committee for the International Geographic Year released a report about the possibility of a signed satellite launch. As a result, Explorer 1 was developed. On October 3, 1957, Soviet Sputnik had become the world's first satellite. A new realm of competition had emerged between the United States and the Soviet Union. On July 5th, President Eisenhower signed the National Aeronautics and Space Act of 1958, thus founding the United States space program. When Soviet Yuri Gagarin had become the world's first man in space, less than a month before American Alan Shepard, President John F. Kennedy delivered a special message to Congress on urgent national needs, determined to set the stage for American victory in the next space race milestone.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
The explicit motivation for a United States lunar landing was political. In a private conversation, Kennedy confided to NASA Administrator James Webb,
Important for political reasons, international political reasons, and for this is, whether we like it or not, it tends to raise. I think everything that we do ought to really be tied into getting onto the moon and ahead of the Russians.
Through the extraordinary pace of development of the space program that led up to the lunar mission, the United States demonstrated its scientific and technological superiority. The ability to mobilize vast amounts of resources was demonstrated not only with monetary funds to invest in the technological development, but also with the people who would make this development possible, the American youth. Starting with Eisenhower's National Defense Education Act of 1958, which provided college loans for math, science, and foreign language majors, young Americans had been motivated to pursue careers beneficial to the Cold War effort. The space race had created a new generation of scientists and engineers. From 1961 to 1964, the number of NASA employees doubled from 17,000 to over 35,000, and the total number of people involved in these projects amounted to over 400,000. The pivotal point between the success and failure of the space program lay in its organization. Dale Wolf had written in Science magazine, "In terms of numbers of dollars or of men, NASA has not been our largest national undertaking, but in terms of its complexity, rate of growth, and technological sophistication, it has been unique. It may turn out that the space program's most valuable spin-off of all will be human rather than technological. Better knowledge of how to plan, coordinate, and monitor the multitudinous and varied activities of the organization required to accomplish such great social undertakings." Between the two systems was evident when observing the Soviet space program. Sergei Khrushchev, son of Premier Nikita Khrushchev, experienced firsthand the inadequacy of the Soviet space program. When asked in a later interview about how close the Soviet program was to a lunar landing, he explained, "The Russians were not close. When talking about the Russian space program, there is a misconception in the West that it was centralized. In reality, it was more decentralized than in the United States, which had one focused Apollo program." When Apollo 11 landed on the lunar surface July 21, 1969,
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
An achievement of enormous national pride, uniting the country under the prestige of accomplishing such an incredible feat. President Nixon had telephoned the astronauts to congratulate them.
Hello, Neil and Buzz. I'm talking to you by telephone from the Oval Room at the White House. And this certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made from the White House.
Immediately following Apollo 11's success, the Nixon administration publicized this image of national strength with Moonglow, the 12-day, 8-nation tour designated to advocate strong international relations. The spirit of Apollo had considerably weakened the Soviet spheres of influence, allowing the U.S. to be greeted with welcome in Romania and have better international relations with China. The Soviet space program had stagnated, and efforts to achieve a Soviet lunar landing ceased to an end several years later. The United States had prevailed in the space race, emerging a superior nation ahead in the scientific and technological fields. The clearly defined success from Apollo 11 allowed for heightened interest in international cooperation in space research. The Kennedy administration had worked for collaboration between the United States and Soviet Union since the early 1960s, but the tension of the space race that emanated from the Cold War conflict made partnership impossible. The Soviets had refused this proposition due to the close ties between space research and the military and defense fields. Apollo 11 had brought the space race to a close, which led to collaboration between the United States and Soviet Union, demonstrated in the infamous handshake of the Apollo-Soyuz mission. International cooperation with allied nations developed between the United States and European nations and Japan on space-related activities in the years following. The extensive technological research done by NASA was applied to fields such as national defense and medicine. In the Aeronautics and Space Report of 1969, Nixon had written in his message of transmittal of the valuable outcomes of the space program. It has contributed to our national security, to our education, transportation, and commercial strength, to our scientific and medical knowledge, to our international position, and to our sense of the dignity and capacity of man. The new scope of surveillance was not only beneficial for military and national defense purposes, but was also applicable for commercial realms. The GPS system, first developed for military use, has become a commonly used technological feature. Information of rainfall and potential flooding was invaluable for the agricultural industry, and tracking ice movements of the Arctic and Antarctic regions sped up shipping by several months a year. Micro-miniaturized electronics, created for application in space research, led to the development of hundreds of medical devices and techniques. Long-duration heart pacers, automated patient monitoring systems, and transmitter pills are among the many life-saving medical advancements that arose from the space race efforts.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
When Apollo 11 had successfully journeyed to the Sea of Tranquility with Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, the mission held more than just the three men. Aldrin explained in a message to Congress soon after his return, "Those footprints belong to the American people, and since we came in peace for all mankind, they belong also to all the people of the world." The Apollo 11 mission had come to represent human capability, whether achieved through unity and collaboration, as with the NASA space program, or through discourse and competition, as with the Cold War. Neil Armstrong's historic moonwalk, where he uttered the unifying message for comradeship of all humans,
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
was only a taste of space exploration. While lunar exploration has ceased to an end for America, a new frontier emerged to stretch the capacity of space exploration: Mars. With dozens of satellites and a handful of rovers having already perused the surface of the red planet, Curiosity being the latest and most developed, still probing the surface today, a heightened interest in a manned Mars expedition is beginning to emerge. As President Nixon had written, the year 1969 was truly a turning point in the story of space exploration, the most significant of any year in that still brief history, and the story is only beginning.